Join me today for another BattleTech Bits segment. This time we're going to talk about the Exodus. This is the Geek Ball channel. If you've not been here before, my name is Bobbie, and today we're going to be talking about the Exodus in BattleTech. If you're not seeing one of these videos, the whole idea here is I take a topic that I think can be covered in roughly 10 minutes. Haven't quite hit that in the other videos, but we're going to give it a real shot here. And just try to cover something from the lore that I find interesting, or I can try to cover in 10 minutes. So so the Exodus. It was actually called Operation Exodus. So got some notes here, some facts and figures and dates. So after the Amorous coup was put down by General Kerensky, Alexander Kerensky, and the Star League Defense Force, in 2780, there was a meeting of the Star League where it was decided there was only a handful of things they could actually conclude. They could not decide on a successor. They all wanted to be the new Star Lord, Lord of the Star League. And they decided to hand over Comstar to Jerome Blake, which also meant he was kind of in charge of Earth. And that's a decision that would have far-reaching consequences quite a bit later. But they also decided that Alexander Kerensky would be stripped of his title of not General of the Army, I believe it was like Defender of the Realm or something. I should have written that down, apologies. And so then Kerensky spent the next 4 years, roughly, trying to get them to see the light, that they needed to come together because otherwise war was inevitable between them because they were all going to try to grab the title. And a lot of people assumed that Kerensky would just take the title, but he wasn't a Cameron, he was a man of honor, etc., and he ultimately opted not to just seize power. He could have, because the Star League Defense Force was powerful enough, they could have easily fought off 2 of the House armies at the same time if they had to. Maybe 3. So, but he didn't do it. And then his units began to defect to the House armies, which is what he was afraid was going to happen, that his men and the war material they had, would make the upcoming war even worse by making the armies of the great houses even stronger. So they decided that it was time to leave. They called a meeting on Terra, and a little over 80% of the Star League Defense Force agreed to go with them out into the void to parts unknown. So in 2784, they conducted Operation Exodus, where they had somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 million personnel and over 1,300 jump ships, numerous warships, drop ships, all kinds of battle mechs and vehicles, and basically everything they could get that wasn't bolted down. They stripped every Star League Defense Force cache they could find, took terraforming equipment, basically everything they were going to need to set up life someplace else. And like I said, it's a little over 80%. There's a few notable groups stayed behind. The group that would ultimately become the Eridani Light Horse mercenary unit, they're still a thing in 3151, 3152. I think the 4th Tau Ceti Rangers, I believe, is one of the others. And I'm sure there's others. There's a list, but too big for the index card. So they take off. Now it took them a while to get out of the inner sphere, and they had to go through the Draconis Combine, and the coordinator kind of guessed what they were doing, but also didn't want to try to fight them because they could have easily crushed him. So they finally reach the edge of known space and take off. And they are traveling for roughly 2 years, it looks like, because in 2786 they finally find the Pentagon Worlds, which is where they set down and try to build a new society. Now, along the way, there's the Prinz Nguyen mutiny, where people aboard the Prinz Nguyen decide to conduct a mutiny. That's pretty straightforward. And they are put down. And Kerensky knows that this is the sign of a potential growing problem because people are getting restless because they've been in space for years at this point. So once they get the report the Pentagon worlds are habitable, they're like, well, we're here, we're home. So they settle down. Now, they are there for, roughly 15 years before the Pentagon Civil War breaks out in 2801. And that's where old hatreds from the old nationalities flare up, and everyone starts fighting each other. And that is where Kerensky's second in command and best friend, De Chevalier, ends up dying in the fight. And that pretty well breaks Alexander. So then roughly 1 million people, and whatever they can grab a hold of, take off for the second exodus. And they go to Stranomekti. Once they're there, they begin building a new society there. Alexander Kerensky dies, and then his son Nicholas Kerensky takes over. Nicholas has some interesting ideas for how humanity should proceed, and begins to reshape society into what ultimately become the clans. And then, over the course of several years, 16 years, they rebuild, rearm, and begin creating the clans and the clan culture and everything. They get the iron wombs up and running. They actually got quite a bit of it in place before 2817, which is where the early phases of Operation Klondike began with the recon of the Pentagon worlds. And then in 2821, they assault the Pentagon worlds. They hit them all at once. And they send 4 clans to each of the 5 worlds. And by 2822, Operation Klondike is done. The worlds have been subjugated. And what are collectively known as the clan homeworlds are now all under the control of the clans. And thus begins the more solidifying of clan culture at that point. And yeah, so things proceed from there, and eventually you have Clan Wolverine gets destroyed, and yeah, that's most of everything for the Exodus. Then the Inner Sphere doesn't hear from those folks again until, I believe it's Operation Revival in 3050, when the clan invasion begins. So that is the Exodus in a nutshell. Obviously, there's more ins and outs to it. There's a lot more to it. If you want to know more about it, the Founding of the Clans trilogy covers a lot of this. I did reviews for various books. If you're on YouTube, there'll be links to those in the description or up here somewhere. And then the source book, Operation Klondike, covers the war to retake the Pentagon worlds, but also, some before and after and some other important bits. So I highly recommend that, by the way. Operation Klondike's an excellent source book. Honestly, I think it's second only to maybe the Wars of Reaving source book. But yeah, I've done a review on that as well, and there'll be a link to that too. If you're not watching this on YouTube, at some point I'll probably convert those videos to the file format I need to put them up to put them on TikTok. They're a little bit longer, so I'll get with Jim and coordinate that. But yeah, that is about all I have to say about the Exodus. Yeah, like I said, long-reaching repercussions though, because eventually the clans come back, leaving Blake in charge of Comstar. That ultimately leads to the Word of Blake Jihad after the clan invasion, and the succession wars as the House Lords tear each other apart. It set a lot of things in motion that had a lot of impact over the next 300 some odd years in the Inner Sphere. So yeah, anyway, that's all I've got to say on this one. So let me know in the comments if there's anything you want to hear about. I've got a few other ideas. There's some other topics I can cover pretty quickly. Like I'm probably going to do a video on Operation Bulldog and Task Force Serpent, and probably Banson's Raiders, even though I know you guys voted and said you want to hear the Highlanders first, but I think I can do Banson's Raiders in a condensed video like this. Highlanders will be a longer video. But yeah, those are the ideas I've got for the next few anyway. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything you want to hear about, and I'll see if it's something I can read up on without literally just reading a Sarna article to you, because you don't want that. But anyway, or just in general, do you like these? 10 minutes is that enough time? Et cetera, et cetera. And if you're on TikTok, feel free to comment there. Jim reads them and passes them on to me. But yeah, as far as for my videos, obviously he deals with his video game videos and our joint videos. But anyway, that's all I've got. So like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But yeah, and thank you to everyone who helped us get over 575 subscribers not that long ago. We're well on our way towards 600, and hopefully you'll stick with us for that and beyond, hopefully. But yeah, that's all I've got today. So just remember, no guts, no galaxy.